This is the Dan News Travel Podcast. Please make sure your tray tables are folded away and your seatbelts are fastened.
In a few minutes, we'll hear exclusively from CNN's Richard Quest about his thoughts on what happened to MH370. Bryn Rudkin from Radio Live joins us. He's New Zealand's biggest cruise ship fan. Ain't that the truth? He'll tell us what you should and shouldn't be doing when you get on board your first cruise. Plus, we look at Qatar Airlines' new Doha to Auckland route. It's the world's longest, and it's there where we start with the latest in travel headlines. The long-awaited Qatar Airlines flight from Doha to Auckland touched down last Monday, and it kicked off a 2-day-long sales pitch by the Middle Eastern airline to the New Zealand market. The flight takes 17 hours and 30 minutes. You didn't hear that wrong. 17 hours and 30 minutes. Qatar are using a 777-200 long-range aircraft to cover the nearly 15,000-kilometre journey. While in New Zealand, Qatar Airways Group Chief Executive, His Excellency Mr Akbar al-Bakr, took aim at our national carrier, claiming they were pressured by one of their shareholders, Singapore Airlines, into pulling out of a passenger supply deal with Qatar Airlines.
Now that we come here direct, instead of making the ASP relationship stronger, they have withdrawn. And I know that this is definitely from pressure by their other alliance partners. I envisage it could only be by Singapore Airlines.
Mr Akbar al-Bakr also said our national airline has become out of touch with the market and that Qatar cares more about its passengers than our very own Air New Zealand. He definitely was stirring the pot. Qatar gave away 8 return trips to anywhere in the world at an amazing gala dinner at Auckland Museum. Samuel Levi was one of the very lucky winners, but he hasn't quite worked out where he's going to go.
I feel amazing that I've won this trip, business class to anywhere in the world. I still haven't decided where I will go yet, but I've got 2 options which are looking like Paris or New York, so I've got to do my research and see where I want to go.
But the news is all positive for Air New Zealand when it comes to its flights in and out of Queenstown. In 2016, the airline carried over 1 million passengers in or out of the tourist hotspot. In 2006, that number was only 375,000. Last year, Air New Zealand became the first airline to operate scheduled flights after dark out of Queenstown, allowing for more daily flights. Singapore Airlines have gone on a shopping spree at Boeing. The airline has placed firm orders for 20 777-9s and 19 787-10s. That order comes to a whopping $13.8 billion US. It's all about the numbers. This is on top of their current order of 30 787-10s, 5 more of the huge A380-800s and 57 of Airbus's new A350s. And it doesn't stop there. Their budget carrier, Tiger Airways, has ordered with Airbus for 39 A320neos, as well as Silk Air's 37 737-8 MAX. Now just imagine how much the postage and packaging is going to be on that order. And finally, a woman in the USA is claiming she was kicked off of a Spirit Airlines flight because she was showing too much cleavage. The woman from New Orleans, who only wants to be known as Brenda, said she was originally accused of being intoxicated, but cabin crew then took aim at her outfit, saying she was exposing too much flesh.
They mentioned that my body was too exposed. I just feel like if I was smaller or somebody with a smaller breast size, that there really would have been no attention brought.
Other passengers on board have backed up Brenda's claims, but Spirit Airlines deny any of her accusations.
Thanks for travelling with Travel Addict. If you're a frequent flyer or this is your first time with us, then please join us online at traveladdict.tv. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram too.
CNN's Richard Quest has been the network's face of business and aviation news for over a decade. Recently, he was in Auckland for Qatar's inaugural flight from Doha. I managed to grab him for a quick chat to find out about his thoughts on MH370. But I started by asking him how you deal with being on a flight that lasts for 18 hours.
The amazing thing about these flights is that you get on board, you have something to eat, you watch a movie, you go to sleep. and you have something else to eat, and you're still not even halfway there. And then so you sleep a bit more, and then you suddenly realise you've still got 6 hours. You know, and I, because I live in between London and New York, I time everything by that sort of metrics. And I suddenly think, my goodness, I've still got the return journey of a London-New York, 6 hours, 10 minutes to do. And you have to pace yourselves. Otherwise, you find yourself with hours of nothing to do.
How do you travel a lot more than most people? What kind of things do you do in order to get through long flights?
Two things. I plan it in sort of mentally.
Yeah.
So I'm going to think about. Look, I've heard all this thing about put your watch onto the arrival time, and I've done all of that. The key trick is ask yourself, what time do I arrive, and what do I need to do when I arrive? So if I'm arriving in the morning, and I'm going to have to work, then I need to plan the flight so my sleep is at the end.
Yeah.
If I'm arriving at night and I'm going to bed, then my sleep can be at the beginning of the flight. Now, this sounds wonderful, and I can hear some of your listeners saying, oh yeah, that sounds great, Richard. Does it work? And the answer is no. The reality is you do what you can.
Yeah.
You do what you can. I try, though, and judge the sleep as best I can.
It is.
And I take an antihistamine.
Ah, well, that might help as well.
I take an antihistamine, which just relaxes me enough that I can just nod off.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing is change.
Yeah.
Change on the plane. Any flight over 5 hours, I change. I put a pair of sweats on and a T-shirt.
Yeah. That makes you feel a lot better.
I've never understand these people sitting for 14 hours in a pair of jeans. They're not comfortable to start with, let alone to sit on a long-haul flight.
This is CNN Breaking News.
I'm Will Blitzer reporting. Once again, we want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. We want to update you on the breaking news regarding missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Richard Quest is joining us in New York. And you've flown this route. You know at least one of the pilots. Give us your analysis of what we've just heard.
Obviously, people will know you from your coverage on CNN of not just aviation and business, but particularly MH370. And you were very much the front-end for CNN for that story. I want to hear where you were and what you were doing when the story broke and what went through your mind.
Oh, well, I was out at dinner. It was my birthday weekend, and I was out at dinner, and I just got back, and I hadn't taken my BlackBerry with me, and suddenly my BlackBerry, there were lots of messages, and all we had was the flight number, and I quickly looked it up, and I realised it was a 777, and I also knew that this was the first 777 to go missing or to have a crash. Now, yeah, British Airways had one, but this was going to be and there was San Francisco, but this would be the first multiple deaths on a large scale.
Yeah.
And so I knew then, and I told the desk in Atlanta, I told the news desk, prepare for this. This is going to be huge.
Yeah.
No, little did I realise how huge it was going to be. But yeah, we knew right at the get-go this was going to be difficult.
And then essentially, from the coverage point of view, do they get you to a studio and then...
You go straight to the studio. You go straight to the nearest studio you can, and you get prepared for long hours of work. What I think is interesting about, the many things about 370, is the way it kept changing. So you have the incident, and you have to search. Now, you expect them to find the plane or the debris where it was last seen, which would be up in the South China Sea on the way to Vietnam. But then you have the turn back. So you've got 3 or 4 days of turn back story. And then you have it carried on flying for 7-8 hours. So you've got another element to the story. And then you have the immediate search of Australia story, where they didn't find any debris. Now, we now realise they probably were looking in the wrong place, because they should have found debris because there was debris there.
Yeah.
We know that because debris turned up 12 months later on the western side of the South Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
Eastern side of Africa.
So you are pretty certain they were searching in the wrong place?
Well, that sounds terribly anti-cleverish when I say that, if I put it like that. They were searching in the best place they knew with the evidence they had at the time. Yeah. Now, here's my real problem with many of the critics. Oh, they should have been searching there, or they should have been searching there, or they should have waited till they had... No. The reality is, once they knew the plane had flown south, but they hadn't had a chance to fully interrogate the Inmarsat handshakes, and they didn't have any debris drift data to go on. They go, you can't, they would have been criticised if they'd waited.
Yes.
They're criticised for going where they believed it was. They're criticised for searching a bit too far north or a bit too far south. I'm left wanting to say to the critics, what the hell do you want them to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're not, and the other thing that pisses me off about the critics in many cases is they're all clever without having to have the responsibility of putting their signature to send out the boats.
Armchair critics, yeah.
You know, these were men and women who were at the front of their careers, who are global experts, sitting in rooms dealing with tangential information at the forefront of state of the art.
Speaking of there being delays, are you critical at all of the way the Malaysian authorities handled the situation?
Yes, of course one is critical at what they revealed and the way they revealed it. But where I differ from many critics is I am prepared to cut them some slack because of the nature of this story. Remember, the plane wasn't where it was supposed to be. And they knew that on the Saturday night. On Saturday night, they knew there had been a turn back.
Yeah.
How do we know that? Because they admit it in the press conferences on the Monday. The problem is we weren't listening. But if you look at the record, on Monday, they say, we're looking into the possibility of a turn back. We're now searching in the Straits of Malacca. Anybody sitting in that audience would have said, oh, hang on, why are you searching the Straits of Malacca? Hang on, what do you mean? But no, we weren't listening because we were too busy focusing on the 2 Iranians with false passports.
Yes.
Look, I read a book on this whole thing, The Vanishing of MH370, and I went through the transcripts of every press conference. And I can tell you, on the Saturday night, they knew the plane had turned round. The real criticism of the Malaysian authorities is, firstly, they didn't tell us forcefully enough, and secondly, they didn't reveal that they knew the plane had kept flying. On the Thursday, they clearly knew. They didn't reveal it.
We're talking to Richard Quest from CNN about just what happened to MH370. I asked him what he thought about theories the pilot was on a suicide mission.
So he was a bit of a weirdo who had a simulator at home. So people say he was having an affair, but the reality is, as one Malaysian captain said to me, just because your wife's left you, you don't go and murder 239 people. There's no evidence of this. If you look back on the simulator, at the time the FBI said there's nothing suspicious on this simulator. Now they're saying, yes, there are routes and there are various things on there. So yes, he did practice going somewhere, but there's nothing on there that I believe that shows he was... There's no evidence that this was suicide. Now, I'm aware that there is a captain in Australia, Captain Baron Bailey, who writes frequently on these subjects, who disagrees with me and everybody else.
Yep.
Captain Bailey believes that the overwhelming evidence is that it was suicide, murder. He may be right, and all those people who say that may be right, but there's no evidence of it. There is not a shred of evidence.
Will they find it?
Yes, they will. And this brings me to what I think is the biggest tragedy, the decision by the tripartite not to continue the search. I think that was a disgrace. I think it was an appalling decision, bearing in mind the first principles review had specifically said that it's not where they're currently searching, but the best evidence is a bit further north. Now, the reality is here, while you've got all the boats and you've got all the contracts, it's much cheaper to just say, look, let's extend for another 3 months. But once you've dispersed, you'll never get it started again. So I think Malaysia, Australia and the Chinese have some serious explaining to do.
Finally, just want to ask you, your career, is this your dream job? You get to talk about aviation, you get to travel the world.
No. I've been doing it for a long time. My dream job is what I'm doing, but it's my dream job not because of that. It's my dream job because I get to tell people about the subjects I cover. I get to wake up in the morning and I have a blank sheet. So Quest Means Business is my number one priority. It's the daily business show. We've been doing it for nearly 9 years. Then Business Traveller, we've been doing it for 13 years. So these are all long-standing shows with loyal viewers, and it is and for me, it is a privilege to be able to do it and an honour to be able to do it.
Unless you're a fan of the Love Boat or you've taken to the waters and experienced life on a cruise ship yourself, then chances are you won't know too much about what happens on board. There are many cruise ships that come to New Zealand, and luckily we know New Zealand's biggest cruise ship fan, and he just so happens to be a newsreader at Radio Live. Brendan Rudkin, thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much, Dan, for having me.
So tell us, I've never been on a cruise ship myself, and
I'm missing out.
I know, it sounds like I am. And you have put together a list for us of the things that you should really be doing when you get on board. So.
I have. So I've been quite lucky. I've been on a few cruises now. I've experienced a few different cruise lines. I must say, I am a massive fan, hence why I'm here to talk to you about
Yes.
5 little tips, some advice on what you should do when you're on a cruise if you're going on one for your first time.
Yeah.
Perhaps you, if you book a cruise.
I'll have to do it one day.
Exactly.
So tell us, what's on that list?
All right, so number 1, and it's probably something that everyone freaks out about when you think of cruise ships, mainly because recently we've heard more about gastro outbreaks and sickness on cruise ships.
It is kind of what I think of.
Yeah, exactly. To be honest, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Don't let sickness ruin your holiday.
Yeah.
Mainly because I can guarantee that the first cruise that you go on, you won't get sick at all.
Yeah.
And if you are prone to nausea, just take some pills with you, some sea legs, just in case.
Does it get very rough, though, when you're on board? Because these are massive, massive boats.
Massive ships, exactly. Yeah. And if you're talking about the really big ones, a lot of them have stabilisers. Yeah. So if you do go into rough seas, the captain will put these little stabiliser things out across the ship, sort of like oars.
Oh, wow.
So if you're rowing and you put oars out, it sort of steadies the boat. And that's what ships do when they're hit rough seas.
Yeah.
Also, with being on a cruise ship, if there is a hurricane, if you're in America, or if you're in the South Pacific, and there is a cyclone that rips through, ships can actually just go around it. They've got this. They're in the middle of the ocean. They can just go around it if they have to, and they plan ahead, obviously, and check the weather. And usually the best part of the ship to be in, if you are prone to seasickness, stand in the middle, because it's you won't feel anything. Yeah. If it is rough seas, you might feel a little bit, but it's probably the best spot to be on the ship.
Oh, that's good.
Number 2, and it's something that I always do, and I really shouldn't. Don't board the ship hungry.
Okay.
When you think of cruise ships, you think of buffets, endless buffets. By the way, there are so many, and there are so many food options on ships as well. And as tempting as it may be to head straight to the buffet when you hop on the ship, hold off for a bit, because that's where everyone else goes. And so you're going to get in there and you're going to line up for ages.
Yes.
So while everyone else is in the buffet, the ship's sort of free to roam around in.
Yeah, it's pretty much empty.
And you can just go and check it out. So
Jump
that would
in the
be
pool.
my advice. Exactly. You've got the whole pool to yourself. So yeah, and who knows, you while you're doing your roaming around, you might come across another restaurant or buffet that no one else knows about, so you can get food from there as well.
Are there that many options on board?
There are so many options, and a little later on in the series we'll talk about sort of different culinary experiences on different cruise lines, because some have incredible food options on their ships, and some of them have teamed up with some very well-known chefs.
Oh, wow.
Some like Jamie Oliver.
Wow.
So some great food options. So yeah, that was number 2. Don't board the ship hungry. Number 3, before you do anything else, tour the ship. So this sort of relates back to my last point about, why you've got the time when no one else is around the ship. Go and look. Go and tour it. And unless you're travelling on Royal Caribbean's Oasis-class ships, which are massive, they're the biggest ships in the world, you have no excuse for saying the ship's too big. So why not go and familiarise yourself with the different areas you'll be spending most of your time on board. Get to know where the elevators are, where the buffets are, of course, and the easiest way to get there. Because I tell you what, come morning time when you want to get breakfast, it's packed. So if you can find a little shortcut to get there. Also find out where the staircases are, because sometimes if you have to go into sort of an emergency evacuation of the ship, it's quite handy to know where.
Do they do a run through like when you're on a plane?
Yes. So as soon as you board, and just before the ship's about to leave port, they do a muster drill.
Yeah.
So you sort of find out where your muster station is, and that's where you go to if you have to hop off the ship, and then that's how they determine the groups to fit in the tender boats when you have to hop off. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen to you on your first cruise, because that will just ruin it for life. Number
if you
4,
make it.
Exactly. Number 4, looking to save money. Go for the cheap cabin. I mean, it is kind of nice to look at the balcony rooms, the suites, and go, man, wouldn't it be great to just get one of those rooms? To be honest, how often are you actually in the cabin?
Yeah.
You're only in there to sleep and shower.
Yeah.
So you're only in there for a few hours, really.
Yeah.
So I have always gone for an inside stateroom, and they're really nice. And just to sleep and shower, and then you've got extra money to spend. I don't know, alcohol. An alcohol package or something.
Yep.
Some restaurants on the ship, because they're specialty restaurants, you have to pay a fee.
Yeah.
So, if you want to go and experience those, get the cheaper cabin. You've got more to spend on the ship and off the ship too when you're visiting the ports.
When you're lying in the bed, though, do you sometimes think, oh, moving? Or do you just kind of get used to it? Or
it's sort of when you actually hop off the ship at the end, and you're like, oh... And you're lying in bed at home, you're like, oh, are we moving? It's weird, because you do get used to it on the ship and you don't realise that you're actually moving. Unless you are in rough seas, then you can...
Hold on
It's
tight.
an experience, and I have been on a cruise where it has got quite rough, and nighttime has been kind of fun, to say the least. It's when you hop off the ship that it's really weird. And even when you're walking, it's sort of like, oh, am I moving? And number 5, the final one, it's a bit cheesy, but do watch the sunset over the ocean. It is just so beautiful. And best of all, doesn't cost you a thing. So it's great entertainment, I guess. You can go and stand out on one of the top decks by the pool, maybe grabbed your loved one. Yeah. Or, in my case, a cocktail. Because, it's way better than holding a loved one's hand. And just watch the sunset. It's so beautiful. And when you're out in the middle of the ocean and you can't see anything, it's just ocean, it's an incredible experience, because it makes you go, far out, this world is so big. And you sort of don't realise how big it is until you're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So the rundown of your list is on the website traveladdict.tv. Thanks so much for doing that for us.
If you guys have been on cruises as well, share us your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I'm really keen to hear ones that people have been on and the experiences they've had. And there's plenty more cruise ship content coming from you in the weeks ahead. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for joining us on the very first Travel Addict podcast. It's episode 1, so we're really keen to hear from you. Do you have a travel story you'd love to share with us, or something you'd like to know more about? We're online and on social media. Just head to traveladdict.tv for all the links. I'm Dan Lake, your host. Find me on Twitter @DanNews. And until next time, happy travels.